In part 2, we found out which optic setups were the most compatible using a PVS-7 goggle, and now it's time to see how the dual tube night vision stacks up with our day and night optic combos. Again, this isn't about active aiming with IR lasers, rather what night optic works the best from a user experience, also with a day optic option. Just because a night optic may work great, it may not be the most versatile day optic. Everything is usually a trade-off or a compromise, it seems. Although this is what Hollywood sees through his Gen 3 white phosphorus, I'll be filming through a Gen 2 green phosphorus for this video. Let's see if any are more or less useful with the dual tube setup.
1 to 6 LPVO it looks like, with your rear mounted dot. This is a disaster. Okay, so I can't describe what I'm seeing right now, but I will try. What I'm seeing is just a giant blur of the housings of these optics, brighter in some areas than others, and this star, basically, which is your dot, the offset dot. Seeing the offset dot out of my right eye, and I've just got this massive blur of stuff right here. It's very distracting. Up close, it would probably do, but it doesn't look good. Yeah, like literally what I have right now is I have this giant mess of different colored shit obscuring my midline and lower and left and slightly lower right of my vision, and I've got the rest of the environment visible in the top left and right sides of my tubes, and just this bright dot in the middle. It's just a mess. It's just a fucking mess. It works, don't get me wrong. This is not ideal. It's going to be that big of a deal if you're just going to go LARP on the range for like an hour or something like that. Not a big deal. If you're going to go run a night vision course where you're basically on the firing line 8 hours straight, 9 hours straight, and you're just doing drills over and over and over, it is going to hurt your fucking back. And not to mention, I just like to be tighter behind everything anyway. I want to be as small of a target as possible. It wouldn't be my first, second, or third choice, let's put it that way.
Okay.
You have an ACOG here on a Unity mount with the intent to be able to use this with night vision. Again, not a big fan of magnified optics of any kind with night vision because there's already magnification within these. That's what your diopters do when you set them accordingly. So I'm not a big fan of magnified stuff, but we'll see how this works. So I have the reticle out of my right eye, kinda. It does not look good in comparison to the background. Again, running a magnification through magnification, not great. So I've got this partial reticle mixed in a sea of nonsense that's going into my lower left of my vision from all this tube and everything around it. So when you look at this, you've got a tube that may be smaller right here than an Aimpoint T2, but as you go up further to the objective lens, it's much larger. All this shit that's sitting around here is visible in my lower field of view of my nods right now, and it's distracting. It's not completely obscured, you can still see it, and that there's going to be part of that's just life. We're running night vision. Night vision is not perfect, but this is not an ideal setup either, because I don't dislike ACOGs. They're pretty cool optics, but I'm sorry, you know, anybody who plays with any of the shit we've touched tonight, you pick up an EOTech or a T2 or even like one of the little hollow suns through a 193 to a 2.26 mount, you're probably going to have a really hard time articulating why this ACOG setup is better than any of the red dots like T2s, Aimpoint, like EOTech, any of that shit. That stuff just works way better. It just does. And again, what distance do you really think you're going to be shooting at night? I'm sorry, we're not really in a situation where you're going to be able to get away with engaging people at 300 or 400 yards when all you can see is their silhouette. You are not going to be able to defend that in court. And for those of like, you know, this that are super black-pilled and think we're going to go into this, you know, shit hits the fan where it's all out warfare in the streets, it's not what, you know, the country might be falling apart, but that's not what our situation is going to look like.
Yeah, basically the ACOG is a day optic.
It's a day optic.
Which means you don't need it that high because you're already going to mount a super high red dot to try to use it passively with nods.
The way I would prefer to shoot this, no goes, man. Like I barely have the reticle at all, and then again, I can't see shit past the reticle. So this is useful for like maybe 25 yards and in, where my other eye staying open, I can still see my target in the distance. Not good, man. So absolute co-witness, putting this bottom of this brace into the pocket of my shoulder where I like my stocks and braces to sit. Now I have an optic. So I've got a reticle here, and that's heads down, kind of compressed into that forward aggressive stance shooting. It is not comfortable. It's tugging my back quite a bit down here, and it's arching my neck a little bit. It works. I can see the optic, but I've really got to just lurch down into it. Try the high, head it kind of a higher height and back. When you can see how high this thing's tilted just to get me a reticle, I mean, I would be shooting directly over their heads. It does, it tracks, but it is uncomfortable to do it. It is absolute co-witness is not a good height for night vision shit. So what we're running right now is the Geisley 1.93 mount with a Hollow Sun 403 or a 503, I can't remember which one, sitting on top of it. Where my dot is right now is going to be high on target. Like for me, it's just, there is going to be some craning of your neck downward for me. So hope everyone gets that caveat that everyone's body style is different. So doing a simple like up drill, this is very intuitive. I said in the previous video, anywhere between 1.93 and 2.26, you really can't go wrong, and I absolutely mean that. This is 1.93. It is the base height I want on all of my optics. It's the very minimal I want, and I mean, it just, honestly, it rocks. It just works. It just works. And so it's better to me because all I'm doing right now is the only thing that's locked in my field of view is the black ring around the optic. To close out the 1.93 works very well. I have my dot. It is passable, but I have to get this, in order to get the dot into my field of view, I have to basically bring this up high enough that right now, right there, this will be about the right height for me at a point blank shooting to get things done. If I was doing like a room clearing situation or whatever, I don't see my dot right now. I don't see my dot until I get to, come back, there. Lost it, got it, right there. That's a little high for, just in general. So to make this work with an offset 45, I've already got to bring this higher than my typical point of aim would be, which is just not going to be ideal. So the other part about it is I've got it at the right height, but it's easy to lose it. It's easier to lose it, it seems like, as well, depending on side-to-side movements and things like that. Offsets just are not ideal for night vision. They're just not good. You need to have shit mounted at 12 o'clock for this. But on top of that, you're going to have this offset 45, which again is up and to the right of your muzzle, and a laser that is up and to the right of your muzzle, both of which are not up and to the right at the same location. So you're going to have like your muzzle impact, or your point of impact, your point of laser impact, and your point of your optic impact are all three going to be different. That's a lot of shit to remember in a high stress situation where you need to use this to save your own ass. So again, 45-degree offsets just don't fucking do well on your night vision. It's just not ideal, man. It's a weird position to have to put yourself in as it stands already. It's too easy to lose your dot. And again, when I'm looking at this, I have my dot here. Literally, like the lower 1/3 of my entire left side of my vision is obscured by bullshit here. It's obscured by the mirage or just the mess created by this. So I just closed my left eye and I'm just looking through my right tube now. Yep. And literally the lower probably 2/3 of my left tube is obscured by the nonsense. Your right tube, you mean? Yes, what I mean, my right tube. So I'm looking through my right tube, like so, and I've got my dot, but literally it's like I have a half moon shape of view up here. And I can't see anything to the low left of the dot. Which means if I've got a situation where I've entered an unknown environment and I have to worry about threats below me or anything else, it just doesn't work, guys. It just doesn't do it. Like you buy your own shit, you buy whatever you want, but this is not ideal. And you're going to be much happier with something that sits at the 12 o'clock than something that's a 45-degree offset. I know these are cool. I like shooting out of these, and when I'm not under nods, it feels kind of intuitive to just kiss a little bit here and kind of like offset this. It actually feels kind of good to do that, just not under nods, man. Again, it wouldn't be my first, second, or third choice. Okay, so this setup, Aimpoint T2 sitting on top of a Unity riser, optic mount, whatever you want to call it. So it's bringing it to 2.26 height. Optic height through the knobs. This is like smooth. This is just smooth. Whether you're doing it in your high heads up position, whether you're getting behind it in a forward aggressive stance, it just works. 2.26 in the tube more or less disappears. So get one that's black, because unlike the little flat dark earth RMR we were playing with a little bit ago, there is a little bit of blur that is the edges of this optics tube, but it's so thin it doesn't obscure shit. So when I'm looking through this, I have stuff. The lower probably half of my view does have some mess in it from the mount itself and from the optic itself. And it's blurry, it's not easily distinguishable, because again, the diopters in these are set to a distance of something like 100 yards or whatever, which means stuff up close is going to be incredibly blurry, but this just looks clean. But this thing fucks, man. This thing knows how to do it. It's good. Again, high, you know, head high up as I'm told I'm supposed to do. Stock all the way into the brace, all the way into the pocket of my shoulder. Works. My typical forward aggressive shooting stance. Works. Works really well. Just a typical Geisley 30mm mount. This is not the extended mount or the extra long, or whatever the fuck they call it. Sitting on top of it in the furthest back position is a Reptilia ROF mount that mounts to the top of the Geisley mount, and it's sitting on a 5mm riser plate. And above that, the actual optic itself is another one of the Hollywood 508Ts. Again, it comes into view well. It does. But it's high compared to where I want to shoot. Again, I'm a forward aggressive shooter, so behind the rifle. Now, this does work, but it doesn't work like I want it to. It's not ideal. It would not be a first choice go-to for me.
Are you tapping the nod on the back of the
I'm tapping the nod on the back of it. That's one part of it. But the other part of it is it to get it. Honestly, no, that is the big part of it. Trying to get it to where I want it, I'm tapping the nod on the back of this. The stock is as far back as it'll go. It is as high in my pocket of my shoulder as I can reasonably run it, and still actually not just fly off my shoulder with any kind of recoil. This is not ideal where it sits. Now, what I do plan to do is get one of the further forward Geisley mounts and try this again, because I do like this setup. This could potentially begin to bridge that gap into that all-around do-it-all rifle. The two things that you have to keep in mind are, number one, if I get this mount that pushes things further, that means more weight further up on the gun, which is going to be more weight in this fulcrum pulling me downward. Not comfortable.
Can you collapse your stock in just a hair where you think you'd actually run it? And also step back just a hair? You tapping nods hardcore or what?
Tapping nods. Now again, it's not such a terrible thing for somebody who's got like RNVGs, which is what these are. They're not going to disarticulate out of being useful. So, you know,
can you still see the red dot?
I can still see the dot. And the dot's at the appropriate height.
Is it blurry because it's back so far at all?
No. The location of front or back for me does not matter on these. When we're talking a night vision game, it does not matter to me. To get where I need to be right now with this setup, I am not balanced. What you can't see are the way my feet and my center of balance is planted. Again, from my body type, doesn't fly. This just doesn't work. What happens here is to make this high heads up position work, or just heads up in general, I have my dot there, and my dot is going through my left lens right now. It is not comfortable, man. It's not. Like, heads up, step forward. This is not comfortable. This is a lot of strain right here. And again, I'm in reasonable condition. I'm not, you know, I'm not a soy boy, so it's not one of those issues. This is not where I want things to be if I've got to use this passive aiming. And I understand too, the other idea was that passive aiming is kind of just an emergent situation. That depends on what you think you're doing. If you're, if you find yourself in a, a gunfight with a bunch of dudes that don't have nods, well then it doesn't matter. Laser your targets and be done with it. Just get over with it. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to make an all-around rifle that does everything, that I can just reach into the safe and grab and just go and do everything with it. It will, every environment, every scenario, it'll work. I've got far, ranged shooting, close-up CQB stuff. I've got white light. I'll have a D-ball on it, whatever. Well, the D-ball won't clear my fucking LPVO. Strike one. Strike two, it is not comfortable to shoot this because I keep tapping my nods in the position I shoot in, which isn't something I want to keep doing. And if I was running articulating duels, I sure as fuck wouldn't want to keep doing. And this is just not a good, comfortable position to shoot in. Does it work? Yeah, it works. You'll get beat out every time by the T2s and EOTech sitting on a Unity riser. You just will. And that's where it comes to it. There's just no perfect setup. If there was a perfect setup, I wouldn't have a bunch of different ones. I'd just have one and duplicates of that. Not my first, second, or third choice, again. EOTech EXPS 3, which is already a lower 1/3 itself, sitting on top of a Unity fast mount, which is taking this thing up to 2.26. So, in the down position, during our daytime shoot of this, I wasn't a huge fan. Let's see if that translates into the nighttime shooting. Yeah, I got it. I've got my optic. I've got my reticle, I should say. I've got my reticle. It works. I do have a bunch of distortion here, which is the magnifier in my lower field of view. And God help you if this magnifier happened to be like flat dark earth color, because I would literally have like a complete whited out view at the lower part of the optic. But this works. It does. Now my typical shooting position, more forward aggressive. I tap my nods on the magnifier. It works. I still have my view, and my view is at appropriate height if I needed to take center mass shots on a guy that's typical size. I can do it. The other thing I want everyone to keep in mind when they're watching this is you probably might have just caught what I just did. So if you're doing a situation where you're like part of a team or whatever, and you're doing clearing a room or whatever, when you go to stack up, you're not going to stack up in the low ready. You don't want your rifle muzzle pointed at your back of your buddy's legs or whatever. You're going to stack up probably in a high ready. Punch out as you make entry and bring this to your shoulder. Doing so, what I'm doing is knocking my nod on the way up and knocking my nod on the way back. It's going to happen with an LPVO, it's going to happen with an ACOG, it's going to happen with a magnifier that's still attached, which again, if you're running a nighttime scenario, why are you still have a magnifier attached? It's pointless. You can't use this shit through nods. It's a waste. Take it off, put it in your bag. So, something to keep in mind. I still think this would need to get out of your way. I still would take this magnifier out of the way. Again, I don't leave magnifiers on my rifles anyway because that's just extra weight. This fucker's heavy. I mean, so shit back here is going to be a problem no matter what it is. Get anything that's back here out of the way if you're going to be running tubes. And again, right now, I'm not hitting it like I was a second ago, but I've also got my stock further out here. I don't run my stocks as far out. So I think we've made our point here, and that this having shit back here is not ideal. The EOTech works great. Yes, in counter to what we talked about during the daytime, you can still sight down this with this magnifier back here, but it is not something I would do. I would not keep this magnifier on my rifle if I was going to a nighttime situation. Not getting that guy off for the video tonight.
It's all right. In your personal opinion, looking through the EOTech reticle, what do you like better? Just a simple dot turn down, or do you like the EOTech on its night vision setting?
So I'm indifferent. I guess a slight nod to a dot turn down, just because it's less busy. The EOTech is cool though, because when you got your first EOTech years and years ago, you thought it was going to be a crystal clear, crisp, reticle, and you're like, dude, it's a blur, right? Like it's just real artifactual. It's a holographic kind of blur. Under nods, it looks like you thought it was supposed to look when you first bought it. It's a real crisp, clean lines of your circle and the edges of your reticle and your hash marks on it and everything else. It looks really good. I guess, honestly, you can't go wrong with either of them. I would take either of them, no questions asked. So, ACOG with RMR mounted at 12 o'clock. Dot is showing up.
So what about left and right? Does it seem like it stays in view since you have dual tubes instead of the single I had where it would move out of view a little bit?
So it's only in view through the right one. It's not like a centered up view or anything like that. It works. It works. You still bump the back of the ACOG a little bit, which again, if you're somebody running articulating housings, something to keep in mind.
Maybe rank them so far. Is that one pretty good?
It's acceptable. I'm with you though. The brown, the flat dark earth, this does look like a giant marshmallow under nods. So it looks like you've got this dot in the middle of a marshmallow. It's not really clear. Like the black housings almost disappear into this blur behind the optics when you're running a black housing, or blur behind the dot when you're running these optics. But when you're running this flat dark earth one, it does for whatever reason. This isn't painted. This is, like you said, this is factory Trigicon Cerakoting or paint or whatever they're using on this.
Some takeaways from part 3 would be 1. Do not buy FD night optics since backlighting can marshmallow a minor glow around the optic, making it harder to see your surroundings out past the optic. This creates blind spots and is less than optimal. 2. Canted optics again seem to cause a blur in the left tube, which comes into view because both tubes merge into one sight picture. The PVS-7 also had this problem, even though it's only a single tube. The lesson it seems is high in centerline is much quicker and forgiving. You could raise your canted RMR up a bit, but you're right back to a high centerline optic basically. In the final part 4, we'll be using a PVS-14 to give these not so optimal setups a final chance, hopefully eliminating some of the left tube blur using a canted optic. After that, we want to take these best options and put them through some final courses of fire to really narrow down which night optics won't make the cut so that you can avoid wasting your hard-earned money. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to check out part 4 for some final conclusions.